talking today with Belinda Coronado of Holland, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. And I guess you might introduce your friend while you were here.
This is Shadow. Shadow is my new service dog. I've only had her 8 weeks. She is 3 years old and came from a breeder. And this is a new journey for us, but she was donated to helping Paws for Veterans. And so I filled out the application. I'm a veteran dealing with PTSD, depression, and suicide ideation. And so after I finished the paperwork, I was gifted, and we are still in a program, so she is learning, and we're learning together.
All right. Well, she is basically welcome to do whatever she likes as long as she doesn't make too much noise. Okay. So to get started here, I'll begin with some background on yourself and start with where and when were you born?
I was born in Joliet, Illinois in 1970.
Okay. And did you grow up in Joliet or did you move around?
I grew up in Illinois until I was 16. And then when I was 16, I moved to Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, with my grandmother.
Okay. Now, what was your family doing for a living when you were a kid?
My mom worked odd and end jobs, and but basically we were welfare recipients. So grateful for the resources in the community.
Okay. And what sort of education did you get?
I graduated. I was the first to graduate in my family, so first generation. My mom and dad. My dad finished high school in Mexico, and my mom only had a middle school, up to middle school.
Okay. And where did you finish high school?
I finished school in Weslaco High, Weslaco, Texas, class of '88, the Panthers, so 33 years ago.
All right. Okay. And then what did you do after you got out of high school?
I kind of just tried to figure out what was next in life. I was trying to go into the Navy. I enlisted, but I didn't end up going. So that was my first time around, and then just trying to figure out college. And then unfortunately, because I was first generation, it was very confusing and a lot to take in with no support. And so I ended up getting pregnant at the age of 20, moved to Michigan, and that's how my story began 31 years ago in Michigan.
All right. And then once you got to Michigan, what did you do?
When I got to Michigan, I was 6 months pregnant. I moved to Holland, Michigan, and was a young mom. I had my daughter in October, and then just tried to figure out life. So growing up in Illinois, there was a lot of violence, a lot of gang violence. Actually, my brother was shot and killed. He was getting ready to go into the Marines. We both had moved up from the Rio Grande Valley about the same time period. I ended up in Holland because of my daughter's father was from this area. And my brother stayed in Joliet, and he ended up getting shot and killed the August of 1990 before I gave birth to my daughter.
Wow.
So what brought me to Holland was just trying to navigate life and trying to find a good place to call home for my upcoming daughter.
Okay. And where did your support come from at that point? Was it
At that point, it was just my daughter's father, friends that I met, inner circle friends. I started working at Myers Thrifty Acres. And so just friends that came along the way, and my daughter's family was kind of a support, but I just had to kind of build a support group. So kind of along the journey, God sends you people and became friends and whatnot.
Okay. Now, you had mentioned that you initially had wanted to enlist in the Navy. Do you remember what motivated that?
Well, my dad and his brothers, they were born in Mexico, and they all got their citizenship. And so that inspired me, and I was always, heard great things about my dad. My dad abandoned me when I was a child, and so, yeah, that was just something like big shoes to fill. All his brothers were professionals, his brothers were professionals, and they all went on to become Border Patrol. One was a police officer in Joliet, actually, and he was what inspired me to go further. Actually, he didn't know me, or I didn't know him. We didn't have a relationship. I just seen his badge, and it said Coronado, which is my last name, Coronado. And so I thought for a long time, because of that I wanted to be a police officer, because he answered the domestic violence calls that my mom and her spouse at the time had. So it was a sense of security, peace, and that I was safe again.
Yeah, but I was a little curious about why the Navy rather than Army or Marines or.
You know, I think no particular reason. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I was young and naive and just maybe came across a Navy recruiter, or they were at the school, I imagine.
That's possible. Okay. Now, at a certain point, as in the early 2000s, then you're kind of getting your life sorted out and together. You're working. You're bringing up your daughter. How do you then wind up in the military?
Funny story. Well, not funny, coincidentally, but you know, just figuring out life, trying to put the pieces together. I didn't have a blueprint of what I wanted, but I knew what I didn't want, and that was moving around from apartment to apartment as I did, being a welfare recipient, not having security, so a home, a place to call home, a great school, because I knew that was part of my struggle. Was we moved around so much that I didn't have the basic gen eds down. I remember having English, and I remember like they would call on you, and I would be so nervous because I'm like they would put a sentence on the board, and then everybody had to take their turn, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get this wrong, like, you know, there's a capital, or there's supposed to be a comma or a semicolon, a parentheses or whatever, and I would just, because I didn't know, those were the basics of, you know, I think they're called the ACEs. I don't know the acronym, but I think it was, you know, the basic foundations, how kids struggle. So it's a domino effect. If you don't have, now knowing this, the basics of shelter, you know, a secure home, safe home, food security, that all affects how a child learns. And so I didn't have many of those tools. And so for my daughter, I wanted consistency so that she could be the best pupil and student. And so with that being in the Holland Public Schools, I was always an advocate for my children. I now have three adult children, but they've all graduated from high school, 2 graduated from college, and 1 made me a grandmother. And so, yes, those are the foundations, definitely.
All right. Now let's talk about specifically then, actually, what's the process by which you wind up enlisting?
Okay, after 9/11, actually, after 9/11 happened, 2001, I believe.
Yeah. And remember do you remember, by the way, how you heard about that, or where you were when you learned about it?
Yes, actually, I was a legal assistant in the prosecutor's office in Ottawa County, and we were in the basement, so we didn't get good radio, but we only got Talk of the Town, WHTC, and there was news breaking that the first tower had been struck, and then the second tower. And yeah, that day, I remember just sitting at my desk and wow, just like everyone else, astonished, mortified, like what's happening, what's going on. But yes, I remember that happening. And yes, 20 years later, I remember where I was. I was at the Art Prize showing my piece, my beautiful journey that talks about my struggles with PTSD, depression, and suicide ideation, and bringing awareness to veterans that come back from overseas, trying to get back into the normalcy of life, and then the cracks in your foundation start showing up as they did in my life. So my beautiful journey talks about the healing journey for me.
Okay, so that has jumped ahead to 2021 then,
Right.
20 years afterward. Okay, but already in 2001, you had a job as a legal assistant. That seems like kind of a step up from other things. I mean, was that something that you were able to stay with, or did you move on?
I worked for the county. I started out in the court, and then I switched over to the prosecutor's office after my second child, or after the birth of my third child. I apologize. My brain is misfires. But yeah, so 9/11 happened. After 9/11, a few years later, my son was he was born in 2000, so 2004, very young. I had the desire to serve my country.
Okay.
So it was more of my honor, and because of my dad's legacy, even though I wasn't raised, he wasn't around, it was a big impression, respectability, and some of the values that I was taught. you know, integrity, honor, and valor, and courage. All of those things rang true for me, you know, stepping up for my country. And at that time, I was married, and I had to get my husband to, well, he had to definitely agree. And
Yeah.
so we talked about it, and he agreed. And so it was 9/11, my patriotic duty, and then also college. And so all those things were a factor in being able to make my family proud. So I enlisted after 9/11, and yeah, so I was 34 years old when I went to basic training, and they called me grandma because I was 34 years old. So
Okay. Now, at this point, did you formally join the Guard or the regular Army?
I joined the Guard, the National Guard,
Okay.
Army National Guard.
And then how did you go about signing up? What was the process?
So walked by the recruiter's office, went and talked to the recruiter. I believe her name was Dorothy Sells, and yes, I just enlisted, and they were like, "You need your husband my husband needed to sign and be on the same page in case something happened to me, and that he would be in care of my minor children."
Right.
So just going to talk to them, sign. Then you had to take the ASVAB test in Lansing.
And explain what that is.
The ASVAB is the entry level examination, Armed Forces Service entry exam.
Right.
Something
yeah,
to
but
that
a basic
effect.
aptitude test.
Yes, aptitude test. And so then you take a test, and depending on where you score, I qualified for a few different things, and I chose to be in military police. But that was an all-day affair. We got up early, traveled to Lansing, took the assessment, and then you do your physical exam and walk like a duck or whatever that was, making sure you're healthy and able. And so then you get sworn in.
Okay. And so when are you actually sworn in?
So I was sworn in that August
Of what year?
of 04, 03, 03. And I went in January, the coldest time of the year. And I believe there was an incentive if you went certain times of the year, there was an additional bonus factor. And I got that bonus factor because I went in January when it was freezing cold. Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, Fort Lost in the Woods.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So you're not Fort Benning at this point. So a lot of people wind up going there in this era. But okay. Okay. So you go to Fort Leonard Wood. Now, before you went out to Fort Leonard Wood in January, were you officially in the Guard and going to meetings and things, or do you not start that until after basic?
So no, you do. They do allow you to go to Battle Creek and train at Fort Custer. You know, your drill weekends. So from August to September, October, November, December, I imagine as well. We went once a month, did the physical training, and you know, did whatever training they had for us, learning your basic, you know, drill and ceremony and your commands and your, all that good stuff.
Okay.
The
Now,
basics.
Yeah. So at that point within the Guard, before you go to basic training, were you assigned to an actual unit, or were you just part of a training group?
It was just a training group that where all the recruits go. So I think that's the normal procedure still as of today.
Okay. So now you go to Fort Leonard Wood, and that's kind of southwest Missouri.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of not a whole lot there. And describe what basic training is like. What happens when you get there, and what's the process?
It's a bittersweet. It was awful and good at the same time. It was, you know, everybody just kind of like cattle. Hurry up, you know, and they're in your face. And I remember I had long hair, and they put us in the gym, and the guys had to get their hair cut, and the women had to, you know, put their hair up. And I remember I had a different color ponytail holder, and they were like, "You can't wear that." And it was very alarming, to say the least, especially being 34 years old, you know, that I'm like, "You're violating my rights." So it was a rude awakening, to say the least, but you were government property, and all was, you know, all was fair and love and war, as they would say. But yeah, they herded us, hurry. You know, we had to cram into a cattle truck, and we're all like standing like in like the subway, really crowded, and you know, it was just, you know, but they had to tear you down to build you up. So even though it didn't feel great at the time, it was well worth it, the 8 weeks of basic training.
Okay. Now, so the process, what do they do to sort of tear you down and build you back up again?
It's just all mind, and physical training, giving orders, wake up call. They tell you when you get up, they tell you when you go to bed, they tell you when you eat, they tell you when you can shower, they tell you what you can and can't do, and you do everything team building, because you're as good as your weakest link. And it's very limited contact with your family. You don't see them. You don't see them. You may get letters eventually a few weeks in. You know, the phone calls don't happen right away, and you're just in a new place with your battle buddies. They teach you, accountability. So you are assigned a battle buddy. How to make your bed. Inspecting from your hair to your boots to everything, how you make your bed and what you eat and what you cannot eat. So we were at the DFAC dining facilities, and we all sat together, we all ate like timed, and it was just, wow, it was just something else. I mean, so that somebody's telling you at 34 years old what you can eat and you can't eat, because you could eat the good stuff, but we weren't allowed to eat fatty pies, which was dessert, or drink, any of the, soda, ice cream, because they had everything there. It's like a hospital, restaurant. They have everything there, but at your first basic training, you're not allowed to eat any of that sweet stuff. You're in training mode, so no soda, no anything. But if I could say, I remember the DFAC, the fondest food that I had was a bean carrot, ham soup. And that was just like reminded me of home. And so, yes, when the first person, you had to eat fast. So thus I eat fast all the time, because you had to hurry up and eat, because depending on when they say you're done, you all get up at the same time. You all throw your food away, whether you ate 2 bites or 3 bites, you're done. When they say you're done, you're done.
All right. Now, were you about the only one anywhere near your age in the group you were training with, or were there a few others who were older?
There was a few others. There was, I can't think of her name, but she was from New York, African-American gal, and I can't think of her name. And there was 2 other gentlemen that were older. So we were grandpas and grandmas. So there was about 4 or 5 of us that were older.
Okay. And then, do you think overall it helped you being a grown-up, or would it have been easier being 18?
I'm going to say it was easier physically for me. Like, in waking up at the crack of dawn, that was easy for me, even though I hated being shouted, them shouting at us and turning on all the lights. That part was easy, the physical part, but it was hard when it came to them, the orders and the kind of the red tape, and this is the way we do things. So easy to some extent physically, and hard to some of the mental challenges.
Okay. And then we talked about the physical side of it. There's also a lot of physical training in basic. Were you able to handle all of that?
That's one of my proudest moments. I scored a 300. I received the AFPT badge. So I kicked butt in that area. And yeah, I was really proud of that, because, it's based on your age bracket, your gender. And so we had push-ups, sit-ups, and the 2-mile run. And some of the younger, I remember Ashley, she did not pass because she could not pass the physical part. So yes, that came easy for me. But on that same note, the drill-in ceremony was difficult for me. And so back in my mind, sometimes I say, I want to go back and do the drill-in ceremony, the calling cadence. So yes, so I had my, we all have our strengths and we have our weaknesses. And drill-in ceremony was not my strength at the time, but the physical fitness was. Okay. So I would love a do-over for the calling cadence.
Yeah, I guess so much for all the guys who claim, oh, the girls can't do that kind of thing.
I don't know about that. There was some, I just wasn't, and I think it has a lot to do.
Well, that kind of thing, I mean, the physical part of things. The women can't handle all of that running around and whatever. I mean, was there much of a difference as far as you could tell in terms of the physical expectations for the men Did they have to run farther or lift
We all had the
more?
same. It just depended on your age bracket, where
Okay.
you at. And generally, if you were younger, the guys had higher expectations. So,
Right.
I think they were normal from a medical or physical perspective, that they were normal for. It's like when you have a baby, they say your baby is within the age,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, but that's what it reminds
Yeah,
me of,
yeah,
the
yeah.
charts.
What is sort of the standard? What's the
Correct, the
height and
standards.
weight for this point?
The
Okay,
heights
okay.
and weights, yes.
All right. So you do 8 weeks of this. Now, do you get advanced training after that, or what comes next?
AIT, advanced training, and that's where I had my military police training. So yes, 9 weeks of that, and yeah, just classroom. We still did the physical training Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then running days, and then the other days were the other training. I can't think of not the running, but the other stuff. I can't think of the calisthenics, what
Yeah.
it's called. But so, anyways, get up, the same thing, the training, the basics, and then we had classroom,
Okay.
and we had field training and all that good stuff,
Okay.
firearms and whatnot.
And you would do exercises that relate to things that MPs do? Is that sort of?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. We were in the gas chamber to make sure NBC nuclear biological training. So we had, actually, I was just going through I should have thought of bringing it, but the graduation footage of the whole basic training, which that was so many years ago already.
Mm-hmm. Now, where did you do the AIT?
There also.
Okay, that's also Leonard Wood.
That was all, so depending on where you're assigned is where the schooling is. So my dad was in transportation, so he also was at Fort Leonard Wood. I came to find out later that he was also stationed at Fort Leonard Wood for transportation school.
All right. So now once you complete that, do they just send you back to Michigan, or now what happens to you?
So yes, you complete basic training, 8 weeks of it, and then you complete your AIT, and then you have a graduation ceremony, and then I returned home to my family, and then I drilled once a month with the Owasso unit,
Which was?
the 144 military police company.
Okay.
And so 1 week in a month, and then 2 weeks out of the year. And then shortly after, I believe that was '04 when Hurricane Katrina
Yes, it was.
struck. And so I was deployed for 6 weeks to Hurricane Katrina, conducting or assisting law enforcement, curfew enforcement, and making sure that just assisting the local agencies there.
Okay. And where did they actually station? Where were you physically? What town were you in?
We were all over the place. It was called Tent City. So I believe I stayed at the Dome, at LSU. I didn't know there was a leprosy colony. Stayed there. So we were roving. We were all over. And at that time, too, because of the news and whatnot, we didn't have access to it so much. I think President Bush had been down there a few times. And one of the visits, I got special duty to guard Air Force One. So that was amazing. And that was already his third or fourth visit before we knew anything about it. But it was Tent City, and it was just a roving wherever we could find a space to keep our company intact.
So you're mostly camping outside of New Orleans someplace, but
Correct.
going into the city or
Golf
then into other areas.
course, all those areas close by New Orleans.
All right. Are there particular things that happened during that time that stand out for you? I mean, there's guarding Air Force One, but other particular memories or images that stay with you?
Definitely, just the slabs of cement, the devastation that people went through, and the horrendous pictures. I mean, I think it just, those stay with me. Slabs of cement, people losing everything, staying at the Dome. All people had was just what they had with them, and then just the facilities being, just not enough for the people that it serviced. So it was awful too, just the humanity that you've seen suffering and trying to collect themselves. So.
And by the time you left, did things seem to be getting a little bit more in order, or was it still a job that someone was going to have to keep doing?
Well, I think it was going to take lots of time.
Yeah.
I think, the rebuilding of, because people lost everything. There were slabs of cement, stuff in the ocean, with all the looting and just the devastation of the water and everything. It was definitely going to take more than just the 6 weeks that we were deployed down there.
Right. How did the local population or people down there, how did they view you or treat you?
They treated us with courtesy, grateful that we were there. We were handing out supplies and stuff, so grateful. A heart full of gratitude that they were alive and that we were there to help, assist in any way we could.
Yeah, well, that's part of what the Guard is there to do.
Definitely.
Okay. So you come back from that, and then during this time, of course, we go into Afghanistan at the end of 2001, and then into Iraq in 2003. So those conflicts are going on, and different Guard and Reserve units are being deployed, and this kind of thing. And you eventually will go somewhere. So, so what's that period? So you get back from the Katrina duty, then over the next year or so, what happens with you and your Guard unit?
Well, I knew I was going to go eventually. It was just a matter of time, and actually ended up volunteering. So I was with the 144 Military Police out of Owasso, Michigan, which has since then disbanded. But the 1776 that I was attached to, actually I volunteered because I knew we were going to go, and I just rather kind of on my own terms volunteer and volunteer to go. So I got attached to the 1776 out of Taylor, Michigan, and we ended up getting pre-deployed, well, pre-deployment meaning getting ready to get sent out. So yes, just go from there. So they attached me to them, started drilling with the 1776, getting mobilized, pre-mobilization. We end up going to Camp Grayling up north.
Okay. And when did you go there for the pre-mobilization?
It would have been the spring of 05, I believe. Oh, no, well, wait a minute, because I left in 06, so it would have been the spring of 06.
Okay. All right. And what did they do in pre-mobilization?
Pre-mobilization, making sure you got all your shots, you're healthy as an ox, in your training, different scenarios, team building, and making sure you met with JAG to get your paperwork in order. In my case, my children were cared for by their dad, making sure I had a will, making sure I had all the stuff needed should I not return.
Okay.
So.
And how long did you spend doing that? I guess, but then, because that's sort of the getting stuff organized.
Right. That's just like a 2-week training, 2-week time. From there, I left in July. I believe it was my middle daughter's birthday, or was going to be her birthday right before it, that I got sent to Fort Leonard Wood, or not Fort Leonard Wood, Fort Dix, New Jersey. And that's where we continued our pre-mobilization training there.
Okay. Now, in the process of pre-mobilization, are they, now they're going to, where were they going to send you?
Iraq, Baghdad.
Okay. And then, did they give you any information on what to expect there, or things to prepare you for functioning in that place?
Well, we had learned about their culture, some of the greetings, some of the taboos that you wouldn't do, because I believe it was like you don't ever show them shake hands with the left hand, if I remember correctly. You don't show them the bottom of your feet. That's rude. And Ramadan is their holy month. So, what to do and not to do, and then, some of their traditions to observe, and all those, politically correct or observe their traditions as we being foreigners coming to their land.
Okay. I'll now ask you an odd question. Some time ago, when reading up on what happened in Iraq and what went wrong, I read something somewhere that said that when doing traffic control and so forth, if you hold up your hand it means go as opposed to stop, and that some people would just drive past you and got shut up because of it. I then met someone who had lived in Iraq and said, no, I don't remember that at all. And he was Iraqi. Yeah. But so were there any weird things? Did you ever hear anything like that?
I don't remember that. We were not walking. We were always in our Humvees. But I take that back because I ended up getting attached to an infantry unit, and we did do, because I was a female sergeant, that I had to go door to door with the infantry to search any female residents. But the custom traditions, I mean, that women, to me, what stand out, that women were treated different. And it was customary that the guys would hold hands and walk 10, 15 feet before the spouse. So those things, and even when they seen me as a female sergeant, they were like in awe, like I was a toy or a hot commodity. So they were in awe that a female was equal to the males counterparts.
Okay, so you have a variety of things going on, but my particular question about traffic control you never heard of.
I have not.
They didn't teach you traffic control, or did they assume it would be the same?
Well, we didn't have that. I mean,
Okay.
I don't recall that. I mean, because we were patrolling, working with the building bridges.
Okay.
We were working with the Iraqi police, and so we assisted them and taught them some of our things,
Right.
you know, our tactics. So
Okay.
more or less trying to help assist them in what practices and procedures to do.
Okay. So much for that silly question. Okay, so we go back. So you get your orientation at Fort Dix. You said, how long did you spend there?
I believe we were there for 3 months because I left in July,
Okay.
August, September, October, and then we got to the green zone, or I can't remember the city before, in October. So we had to be an observant of Ramadan. That was their holy month. So yes.
Okay. Now, physically, how do they get you from Fort Dix to Iraq?
In New Jersey, Fort Dix, there was the Air Force Base, and I can't think of the Air Force Base name, but we loaded the plane and they took us. There was one stop before, and I can't think of the city, but it was still in the safe zone. And I can't remember the city, what it's called for the life of me. I have to call a battle buddy. Newman, he would know. But anyways, it was more still off from Baghdad.
Okay, but it was in Iraq. But did you make any stops between the U.S. and Iraq? And did you land and go to Germany or someplace
I think
in Central
we did
Asia?
stop in Germany, if I remember correctly. It was just like a quick layover, switching, something to that effect, or fueling up.
Okay, and what sort of aircraft were you in?
Well, the first one was a military jet, and you know, those details are all foggy, but it was a military because I remember we were the way we loaded up was like getting on, and it wasn't a normal plane until we got to Germany, and then we switted over or something like that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was asking, because these military things often are less comfortable.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so you land in Iraq, someplace that's not Baghdad, and then how long? And then basically, did you spend the rest of Ramadan there, or?
No, we only spent again some more time there to acclimate.
Okay.
I believe acclimate. It was also tent city. They had MWR, the kind of a recreational, but you know, learning the language, more language infusion classes and traditions, and just making sure that, you know, I guess it was just kind of a getting used to being in that new climate.
Okay, so you're getting your orientation there now in country, and so how long did you stay there?
Not very long. I'd say a week or something.
All right, and then from there you move on to the Green Zone in Baghdad.
Green Zone.
Now
yes.
Explain for people who don't know what the Green Zone is.
The Green Zone was where Saddam Hussein had his castles or mansions or whatever you call them. And so the United States had already took over, so those were like kind of the U.S. territories because we occupied them. So there were many branches, units there. Again, you had your different offices, if you had to get things in order still. you know, a final stop before you were to your forwarding operating base.
Okay. Now, were you based pretty much permanently there, or did they move you out to other areas?
Well, the green zone is where you would fly in and out of. So when you were going home for
Right.
vacation, or going home for R&R,
Okay.
or if you were medevaced out or whatever. But so we were just there for a short time till we had to go to our forwarding operating base, which was in Baghdad.
Okay. So you're in the city of Baghdad, but you're outside of the green zone itself, which is sort of
Correct.
the American
It's not
secure
the same.
zone.
Right.
Okay. And now, how many people were in from your unit went out with you? How large a group were you?
Well, we got attached. So it was a 1776, and we got attached with the unit from up north. They were the cheeseheads, the Yoopers.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember what their number was, but we were attached. It was a military brigade.
Okay.
And I don't know how many, those details are all foggy,
Okay.
but our unit from the 1776 in Taylor, and then the unit from up north, the Yoopers, we got combined,
You were combined.
to go to forwarding operating base in Baghdad.
Now, were you functioning basically as a combined company at that point, or were you a battalion, or did?
Well, I believe could have been combined before at Fort Dix, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
I believe we did. Some of the details are a little foggy, but yes, I believe we did, because we had team building and we needed to operate,
Right.
real life scenarios. So
Okay. And then between those two units, about how many people do you think? How many MPs were there?
how many? Well, math. I'm not a mathematician, but
Do you have a general sense of how many went out from Taylor? Was it like 100 or 50 or 200?
no, it had to be a couple hundred.
Okay.
I mean, I'd say 150, because I know there's 4 platoons, and each platoon is generally, you have a platoon sergeant, 4 squad leaders, and then team leaders, and generally there's 3 of those on the team. So do the math.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, basically your focus was really on, your company and the people you're immediately working with and within your platoon.
correct, like a platoon. So it's all, everybody there's a platoon, and then your squad. Your squad is 3 team leaders, 1 squad leader, and then 3 team leaders under that person. And then a team would be myself, sergeant, and then your gunner and your driver.
Okay. All right. Now, you go to your forward operating base in Baghdad. Describe that, about how big was it, what was there.
It was like a compound. I would say, if I had to describe it, perhaps like 4 or 5 blocks long, lengthwise, widthwise. It was an Air Force. It was a military base. It was called Camp Rustamaya. So yes, it was a compound used for military training for the Iraqi military intel or military. And so yes, we were surrounded by walls. We had bunkers, because we were getting incoming. And I remember the night that we got there at dark at night, and we were in aluminum buildings. And when they would hit us with mortars, at first, they would, I don't know where they would hit, but they would hit somewhere on the base. So it was a regular thing, like they would hit us daily. And so we had the bunker outside of our aluminum building, which I shared with my battle buddy. So yes, most of them were buildings, but aluminum buildings, so not much protection.
All right. Now, did you have bunkers or shelters you could go into, or was there not enough consistent attacks for that being?
No, there
necessary?
was. We all had bunkers, depending on where you were assigned and whatnot. So yes, we all had bunkers, and we all went into them regularly, a couple times a day or a couple times a night, or whenever the alarm sound off.
Now, in the first weeks when you're out there, what do your duties consist of?
So I was a team leader.
Right.
I had a driver. I had a driver and a gunner, and we worked with the squad. So my squad, Sergeant First Class Perez was our squad leader. So there was 3 teams. We worked with the Iraqi police patrolling, assisting them with gasoline, assisting them with patrolling, and learning the lay of the land, team building for them. Sometimes they had, so since I was an MP, we worked off the compound. And that was an experience in itself, because what I learned, the United States is straight lines, or our grids are straight or square footage, and over there it was just like, oh, the wild, wild west. Yeah, and so there were streets and highways, don't get me wrong, but there was also just like the path that we would just take. In our very first patrol, the sunlight was coming in to my drivers, and we're patrolling, right? And so we're just following the Humvee in front of us. Well, lo and behold, there was a hole which our Humvee ended up falling in. So luckily no one was seriously injured, but because of the way we patrolled and there was no rhyme or reason to the roads, that we end up falling into a hole. I would say that our Humvee, we had to get out.
All right. Now, we've gotten you into Baghdad at this point, and you're working at a forward operating base. You're working with the Iraqis. You were talking about just driving around a strange kind of maze of a place that's not as neat and orderly as an American city. Now, as you're patrolling with the Iraqis here at this point, what are you actually doing or trying to accomplish? Are you just driving through the streets, or do you have jobs that you're doing?
We are trying to prevent the fight was between the Sunnis and the Shiites. So prevent senseless violence, improvised explosive devices, which we didn't know when or where we would come across those. And so just trying to build morale, I believe, within the city and the Iraqi police. We would work with the local Iraqi police, and we would, try to build good, I can't think of the word, that we were there to help them, to assist their struggle, building morale within the city, the Iraqi citizens, and observe, because we were still in Ramadan, so observe. You just never knew what was going to happen. So trying to build and keep the city safe, enforce traffic points, inspecting. So we did a variety of different things, providing security, enforcing security and safety, and building the morale within the Iraqi police and the citizens.
So trying to restore some sense of stability or security or normalcy or something.
Correct.
So they kind of go about their lives and their business rather than be afraid of what will happen. Now, so you will get out of the Humvee periodically. You're not just driving around.
Yes,
patrolling.
no, we did get out at the local IP station at first, getting to know their police force, but it was very
IP being Iraqi police.
Iraqi police, and the citizens, because we had people coming there, for whatever reason. They were going there for different documents or wherever we would patrol. And I can't remember exactly what the documents were, but I remember there being lines and, just a variety of things. I mean, the dead bodies that would come and, they would drop them off and just different things. So it was a variety of functions. So I can't say we were just patrolling.
Yeah.
We were doing many different things, but
you're spending time at the police station.
at the police station, out of the wire, to say, off the compound.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Now, were there particular jobs that you did or were able to do because you were a woman? Things if you're dealing with Iraqi women or something like that, you could do things men could not?
Definitely, especially, because of security, and you never knew what they were going to implore to, an act of violence. So using women, children.
So suicide bombers.
Suicide bombers. So definitely being a female sergeant, that was my thing of searching the females that we came across. Sit, sit. So definitely, no, you need to sit. So yeah, it was interesting to say the least, and because I was a female sergeant, some of the things that I did were, because of being a, woman.
Sure. Okay. Now, how long did you actually stay in Iraq?
I was there for a year.
Okay.
I was there for a year, so October to October, and we had our first killed in action Sergeant First Class pre-staff in November. So it really set the tone.
And what were the dangers? Was this IEDs or?
He was shot and killed. So first and foremost, when they said it, I compare it to Vietnam veterans. You never knew where your enemy was and what they were going to implore. So that being said, it was a shock that they used, they killed him with, a rifle or I can't think of they shot and killed him. We were at a traffic control and they killed him. So, and that set the
tone, really.
The tone of the deployment, because we just land and we just get there and we lose our first, and I remember him training me at Camp Grayling, on the range, and I know his children, Frankie, and Frankie, and I can't think of the son's name, the daughter was Frankie, but just, it was so close to home, and you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe it, and, even just talking about it, I'm getting a rise, and that was the first one.
It is one of the things that people who are in those combat situations do consistently say. There's just that shock when it first happens to you. Did you have a lot of problems with IEDs?
We did. And so we patrolled kind of the same area, just like they do here in the U.S. You get your area assignment. And we did those roads, so it got scary, like when we were going to hit an IED, and then the IED started hitting, and you never knew. And that was the thing, that it was like Vietnam, you just never knew when you were going to hit one or cross one, or somebody was going to come out. But yeah, improvised explosive device, those were deadly. If you're familiar with any of that, I mean, it could be an explosive with nails and just anything. And once it explodes, you get all that steel or whatever. Those are deadly. So.
And were these things that would normally target vehicles, or could they just be built into a wall someplace and hit you when you went by, or could it be anything?
Definitely, all of the above. Okay. Set off by one of those tricks that you pull, you trip over, you trip it, and it goes off. So yes, we had a lot of those, and then. I remember May, June, July were the hottest, deadliest months. But not only those being patrolling, but when we were on the compound, we were getting incoming mortars hitting us. And I remember there was a unit that came in, and so we had a shower base, and that got hit. And our trying to remember what it's called, motor pool got hit, and people that just came in, soldiers that just came in, were killed. On base. So if they're being killed on base and then, you go off base, I would think your chances are greater, but yeah, so it was deadly. It was deadly both on and off.
Okay. Now, would the mortar attacks be something where there would be just a couple of shots fired and then they disappear before we can find them, or would you get an extended barrage?
It would have been an extended barrage. You just never knew when you were going to get hit or what time of day or when. So we always were dressed in our Kevlar and, definitely our protective gear. Okay. And, there was just barrages whenever they chose, and we didn't know where they were coming from. So
I guess units that are deployed out in the field in places like that were often equipped to figure out pretty quickly where it was coming from and respond. But that might be, but within a city like that, that might be a whole lot harder. And your unit wasn't really one that was designed to do that anyway.
Correct.
Yeah, you're just there.
Well, when I got deployed or dispatched or attached to the infantry unit, we were out in sector for several days. And I'm trying to think of the name of it, what it was called, Joint Security Efforts. So again, being attached again with another unit, infantry unit, who did the foot patrols.
Right.
And I was fortunate to, or I got attached to them. I don't know about fortunate, but another experience in my deployment that maybe, going door to door, going home to home, more hands-on, looking for suspected terrorists or, people on the list.
So when you're doing that, the infantry kind of would probably go first or whatever and check things out, and then send the MPs in to do your job.
Well, I was attached, so it was like if the infantry did it,
Yeah.
but I was attached to them because being a female. So they had several MPs
Right.
that were females to attach with the infantry unit. So when they had those situations, women
Right.
and children, that we could do those body searches and whatnot.
All right. Now you mentioned working with the Iraqi police. What kind of impression did you have of them in terms of their effectiveness or their morale, or how well they understood what they were supposed to be doing?
That was for me, I didn't trust anyone because you didn't know, and because they were also, just human and getting threatened. Like we would work with somebody and then they were gone, so you don't know if they were killed, but we would always hear that they got threatened, so that they would, their lives were under attack and scrutiny as well.
Yeah.
Standing up for the cause. So it was always changing. So you didn't have time to build a rapport with some people because they were there 1 minute and maybe not the next, and you don't know whatever happened to them. We just heard stories, so we don't know what truly became of them, if they were killed or they left or they escaped for their life.
And then in the field, were they at all effective, or do they rely on the Americans, or?
I think they relied definitely on the American troops, for resources. Definitely. That was one thing, that we were there to provide resources and training.
But in terms of actually going out in places that were dangerous or doing difficult things, would they do their part or hold back?
I think they did what they could to see that they were doing their part, but I imagine, like anything else, they did it with apprehension.
All right. And then the civilian population, how much contact did you have with them, and what sort of relationship was there?
Building or extending olive branches. There was times where we would hand out resources, water, and some supplies. If people would send toys. The children loved soccer, so soccer balls and toys for the kids. Those were amazing experiences because we were, different to them. We were, and then we brought bearing gifts, and who doesn't like gifts?
Yeah.
Especially children. And that was the biggest thing for me, seeing the children, walk to school and go to school, and playing soccer. Soccer was their biggest thing,
Right.
and then just building, within the community. Eventually you get tired of MREs, so there were, in other words, to say, vendors cooking a goat on the side of the road or whatever. And eventually you got tired of MREs, and you're like, let me venture out to get a kebab or something. And but it was I'd say kind of a risk, and I think I have a steel stomach because of that, because you just never knew. But so yeah, because the sheep there grazed. Like I said, you were in the city and they grazed, and there was a dead carcass of a horse. I remember that vividly on my patrol with the infantry units. So, but after having MREO's meal ready, is that, I can't remember.
Meals ready to eat, yeah.
Eat. You can only have so many, and the DFAC. I remember the DFAC dining facility on base. We had surf and turf, that was steak and lobster or crab, whatever. And but when we were off patrolling and we had to be joint force security, we didn't come back on. So we would get a sandwich before we left or get something to go, because otherwise we'd have to eat at MRE. So
Okay. Now, during what part of your tour were you working with the infantry and doing a joint force patrols?
I think that happened immediately, if I remember correctly. Immediately. So it was an eye-opening experience, foot patrolling, going door to door. I made the mistake of saying, "May I use your restroom?" And I thought I was going to see a toilet. It was not. It was just a hole in the ground. And here I am with my gear on, my plates that are heavy.
Yeah.
And I had to squat in the house in the hole, on a hole, and so that was interesting. And then also, being a female, I didn't want to make it hard for me, so you had to use a contraction to, you know, urine standing up. So that was more convenient. So
Weird things that one doesn't normally think
weird
about.
things that you wouldn't normally think about, or you know, until you experience them. So those were things that I appreciate, or like, wow, you know, things like that, that, you know, you're like, how did you do this, or how did you do that, or, you know, when you met some hospitality, you know, their chai tea, small glasses like that, I would say some sugar with a little bit of chai tea, and I'm like, oh my goodness, no wonder people don't have good teeth here, because all this sugar. And I had started, my dentist told me, you need to stop drinking your sugar with your coffee, because sipping on that all day, you're getting cavities. So that's where I started drinking, I call it dirt water, because the water, the coffee in the military, that's what I call it, dirt water. It's just a little dirt with some water for coffee. And that's where I started my experience of drinking black coffee. So.
All right. Now, you mentioned that kind of in around May or so of '07, that was sort of when things were most intense. You have
Getting
a period
heated
there,
up.
heated up. And do you have any bigger picture sense of what was going on and what was happening at that time that was causing the problem?
Generally, it was one of the sides not, you know, showing their force, you know, a struggle. A struggle ensued between the Sunnis and the Shiites, territorial.
Because there were, I know, there were certainly Shiite militias active, and there was, you know, the news reports talk about a neighborhood in Baghdad called Sadr City, which was a Shiite stronghold area. Did you go there, or did you stay away from it?
We patrolled our area, and I don't remember the name of the area.
Okay.
But when I say it got heated up, the same very streets that we patrolled up until then, the IEDs got stronger and more consistency. I remember coming up to one, so we had to be careful that we didn't get like a, you know, pattern, not a pattern. So we try to always, so the one time we went through where we got attacked, we got off, we tried to chase down, because it was a gunfire. We didn't find them, but then there was other times where there was an improvised explosive device, and you know, the fatalities of us, people, you know, that we tried to assist, you know, so it was bad, because I remember it was, my anniversary was like May 22nd, and, you know, I didn't want to worry my family, my husband, and so you know, you're living through this, and you're just like, how do you stay effective without causing alarm at home?
Right.
So that was, I even thinking about it right now, it's like, how did I do that? How did I, and then, you know, we got people that froze up, and, you know, and not anything, not negative on there. It just, it was too much to handle, you know, and it's nothing of negatively towards them. It just, everybody is different. Everybody reacts differently. But when you're seeing this chaos, improvised explosive devices, dead bodies, carcass, you know, dead, you know, the damage and everything, everybody reacts differently. And I just wondered how I got through it, how we had to, you know, go out again outside the wire.
Did you learn any kinds of survival skills or ways of doing things that helped you, or just to be alert about things?
Well, for me, physical activity was always a way to work out my stress. So running on on the compound.
Right.
Again, you had to run with your Kevlar on and whatnot, and be ready for the incoming. So working out, we had a small little gym, and just trying to. I learned how to play gin rummy when I wasn't working. You know, when we had our days off. Sometimes we had, I think Kid Rock came.
Okay. Well, those are kind of
Ironically, things that, you know, would just take you out of that situation for a few hours
Right,
or a
right.
little while. But, you
Uh,
know, just talking to family, movies. I think we had movies that we could access. They sold there.
Now, did you
So
have
little things like that.
did you have internet access?
We
and
did have internet access. They had a hookah shop where we'd play cards, drink coffee, where we could get chai tea. They had some activities, different things for recreational.
Okay. I was also thinking, I mean, you were talking about sort of stress busters and how do you manage that. But when you're actually out there on patrols, were there things you learned about what you might help keep you safe or not, or did you just
Just
do this-
always being vigilant. I mean, don't let your guard down. You always had to be, and that's still with me wherever I go. Where's the exit? You know, what's behind me? What's in front of me? What's on the side? What's on the other side? You never lose that. You never lose that. I mean, I'm always taking the stairs versus taking the elevator. You know, when I'm with family, I'm always vigilant on where they're at. I think I was at a casino recently, and I'm like, something was going on, and just always alert, so you don't lose that, and you're just always, you know, if something happens. And it can be anywhere because, you know, we see senseless violence happening at theaters, stores, always on the lookout for being vigilant. So that is something that just, it's innate.
Now, over the course of the year that you spent there, did you have a sense that you were accomplishing the mission or making progress, or were you treading water?
I think treading water because we're two worlds apart culturally, differently, in many ways, and I get it, being the big brother, being, you know, America helping and providing peace and safety and security, but the turmoil there within their own culture, the Shiites and the Sunnis, you know, and the good versus evil, that was inevitable. I don't think that we could ever, you know, change anybody that drastically. I mean, we can't do that. I mean, we have good intentions, but that remains on them and their plight.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and it gets back to the bigger questions of what we thought we were doing there in the first place. And the Iraq War is not one that made a whole lot of sense to launch to start with, at least from the political historical perspective. But you know, but as military, you go where they send you.
correct.
You have a job to do. You do your job.
Correct, and that's why I especially have a big heart for Vietnam veterans, because they were drafted, and then people were, you know, spitting on them and not showing them respect, and they went in ones and twos, and they didn't get yellow ribbon ceremonies, send-offs, or comebacks. They, you know, and they were changing their uniforms, and I was just like, you're government property. You go where they send you.
Right.
And most of them were drafted. They wouldn't enlist.
Or
And
they enlisted to get ahead of the draft.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but it wasn't like you're winning a trip to Disney.
Okay. How would you characterize the morale within your unit?
You know, the morale was best can be expected. You know, we did our job. We swore, you know, we took an oath to do our best and never leave a soldier behind, in you know, our orders to obey our chain of command. So everyone did what they could do under the circumstances and the orders that we were given.
And what did you think of the officers that you worked with, or your leadership?
You know, there's always, for me personally, our Sergeant First Class Perez, he took care of us. He did the best he could, considering, you know, things in the military, hurry up and wait, or, you know, change. You just have to go with the flow, and there's sometimes no rhyme and reason, so you learn. They're only doing what they can do, and we can only do what we can do with the, you know, information given to us at the time. So everyone, considering under the circumstances, you know, we did what we could. under the circumstances.
All right. I mean, were the officers capable?
Oh, definitely,
Okay.
definitely. We trained with them. You build, I mean, it's family.
Mm-hmm.
They have your back, you have theirs, so definitely.
Okay, good. All right. What kind of losses did your unit take in terms of killed or injured? Or?
We had several. We had several. So we lost Sergeant First Class Pre-Staff in November. And then we lost Specialist Brandon Stout. And he was just getting ready to deploy, and he was newly married. But with the IEDs, I mean, there were so many. Levante was on my squad. He was physically injured. He lost a leg. And so we had a couple dozen injuries and several, I think at least several fatalities that I can think of. So, and then, yeah, we had several. I mean.
And then did you see a lot more civilian casualties? Were the
We
Iraqis
did.
hurting each other?
We did, and that was an eye-opening experience too, because they would just throw them in the back of a truck, the bed of a truck, and bring them to the IP station where we were at. So,
All right.
yes.
Now, to kind of look over that year that you spent in Iraq, are there other particular events or memories or impressions that stand out for you?
Well, I think, the biggest thing being a woman and a minority, that, how women and girls were treated, not the same, like second-class citizens. I was just listening to NPR the other day, and it's still very dangerous for a woman to ride a bike. They would think the worst of you, or you run the risk of getting killed. They would think you were the low of the low, and it's just riding a bike. And I'm like, oh my goodness, how backwards is that?
Mm-hmm.
And, husbands talking about my daughter or my wife, and, something that we take for granted. I mean, riding a bike, you'll get your life, you'll get killed, or, so.
So that cultural difference really sort of stood out for you.
Definitely.
And you were sensitive to that kind of discrimination.
Definitely, definitely. And then religious taboos are, things that, regardless if they make sense to me, that's their cultural traditions. Holy month, Ramadan. And so being observant of that and respecting their, even if they're not my beliefs, their beliefs.
Okay. Now, did you have, you talked a little bit about doing things like giving toys to the kids and that kind of thing and building relationships. I mean, what positives did you see out of that time in Iraq?
Well, I think the language barrier was big. I knew a few words, and even Salam Alaikum. Yesterday, I was in my neighborhood, and I ran into an Afghan family, and I said the little words that I knew. Salam Alaikum. It's been a while, and they were very grateful. And so just the little things, but gratitude, a smile goes a long way. And bearing gifts that helps build camaraderie with the young kids and families. Or, MRE or bottled water. So it wasn't anything extravagant, just small things.
Okay. Now, did you get any kind of furlough or R&R during that tour?
I did. Everyone was extended the furlough for the 2 weeks that you get, traveling time to and back from wherever home was for you. So.
Okay. And so when in your tour did you go home?
Ooh, I think I try to pick like middle of the time. So
Yeah.
we got there at October to October, somewhere in the middle, and that's really the brief that I can remember, the gist of what I did.
So, and what was that like to go home and then have to go back again?
Hard, very hard, very hard. Bittersweet, because you want to see your family, and then bitter because you have to leave them. And my kids were young. I mean, I think my oldest, there was an 8-year difference, Cynthia and Sydney and Zion. So it was hard. It was hard. I think my, the things that I missed, I'm been very active in my kids' life. I was a Girl Scout troop leader for my children's, different resources, volunteers, activities that they did. The routines of being home and just the things that you do every day, work, and so yes.
Okay.
Bittersweet.
All right. And then you get to the end of the tour in the fall of '07 then. And how do they get you back home, or what do they do at the end, and do they do any kind of debriefing or reorientation for you when you go home, or what happens?
Definitely the same. You know, you getting ready to call out, go back. So whether there's a unit coming in, you do a changing of the guard. You know, get them up to speed and what they're doing, and kind of little hands-on training for them, what to expect, or, you know, the ins and outs, or, you know, hey, I don't need this stuff, you can, you know. But then you go back to, we went back to Fort Dix and debrief. I don't remember, and now because of, I think I was just so anxious to get back that I thought I was just fine. I was like, I'll be damned if anything's wrong with me. So I can't say that I remember a lot of the resources, if any, but just trying to get you back acclimated, you know, discharged, all your ducks in a row, health-wise, the paper trail-wise. But you're really anxious to get home, so I don't know if I just skimmed over some of the resources.
Yeah, I think that happens quite a bit. They may be trying to offer you things that might be support that you could use, but you're not always paying attention yet.
I think you just want to get home.
Right.
And
Okay. Now, in your case, you were not leaving the military yet.
no, I was still, I wasn't active per se, but discharged to back to my regular duty.
Your guard unit, yeah.
Guard unit once a month. And I think we had a yellow ribbon ceremony. So yellow ribbon ceremony back into Michigan when we got to Taylor. And then, of course, you know, the units went their separate ways. And, yeah, started training once a month, getting back to work. And just, so, yeah, just regular training once a month, and then the 2 weeks of the year. So.
And was there ever a prospect of the unit getting deployed a second time?
I believe the guards were getting deployed. Actually, yes, because I had gotten out, and my battle buddy, Jason Langenbacher, went to Afghanistan. So that was his third since 9/11. He had been deployed to D.C., then Iraq, and I remember after so many months, I think it was 18 months, you get some more incentive pay. And I remember that we didn't get hazardous pay, and the only place you get hazardous pay was in Saudi Arabia, and I'm like, we're in hazardous deployment. So that was really backwards for me, something that was hard to swallow. But yeah, so because some of the people had already been in, such as my buddy Jason, he had already been deployed to DC when 9/11 first happened. And so that was his second in Baghdad. And then he stayed in. I think he just completed his 20 plus years that he ended up going to Afghanistan.
Okay. So now, did you, when you enlisted, was that a 6-year commitment between, or how did you wind up?
It was 6 years active and then 2 years reserve. So yes, it was a 6-year contract and then 2 years reserve. So if they needed me, or if there was a deployment that they were short, like stop loss, I believe they can't let you go because of they will be short with people.
Although I think it's usually with people who have been deployed, they just don't send them back home yet. Or,
correct.
Yeah, that kind of. But in your case, you're back to your regular guard duty, and then you do that until 2010. Was that?
Yes.
Correct. Okay. Now, did you consider staying in the guard, or do you think that 6 years was enough?
You know, I decided that probably I wanted to get on with my education.
Okay.
So right after deployment, I had applied for college to utilize my educational benefits.
Right.
Ended up, you know, getting my associates and then my bachelor's degree. But yeah, I got out after the 6, and then I kind of had a moment like, oh, maybe I should have stayed in for my 20. But by that time, the paperwork had already processed, and it was time to get back to being a mom. I really, you know, that.
So you go home, you go back to your kids. Did you go back to the same job you had before you left, or did you do something else?
I did, actually, and ironically, or not ironically, just bad on them, people I worked for said, you should be grateful to my supervisor that he held my job, and I was just like, this is a law. You know, I don't care if you held a garbage position for me, garbage person position for me, but that's the law. And so it was really a slap in the face that somebody would say that to you after you served your country. And
So
no couth, and just very,
So did
I
you-
was dumbfounded.
Okay, so there is still that kind of disconnect between military and civilian in a lot of cases where they don't really understand what it was that you did.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Now, at what point do you start going to college?
So I think I got out, I believe I graduated in 2010. So shortly after,
Okay.
getting back into being a mom, working full time, and then I believe I was accepted to. So I had to get my basics, and then I believe I got accepted to the police academy at Grand Rapids Community College, and it was a 10-month program. So I was working full time, and then going to school full time. And don't ask me how I did that, but I did. So I had to do 2 internships, one Michigan State Police and one with the Holland Department of Public Safety. And then you had your firearms training on the weekend and your CPR training. So yeah, I remember that I was utilizing my vacation, like taking an hour to get to Grand Rapids to start PT at 5 o'clock, and then after PT go to class till about 10 o'clock, and then do it all over again the next day for 10 months.
All right. Did your military background help you with the police training?
Yes, it did. But at that time too, I had already been a police reserve, so I had
Okay.
a lot of life experiences and working in the prosecutor's office and just, I was a police reserve prior to that, and I worked in the jail. So a lot of my life experience and work experience, and then additional classroom training definitely helped.
Okay. And when you finished that program, did you become a cop or did you do something else?
I interviewed with Michigan State Police, and it didn't work out, and I decided that it was something that I didn't want to do after all. It was too black and white for me. It was too black and white, and I had seen a lot of things and done a lot of things, and I thought no. So I chose not to, and I think I will serve in other capacities as I am doing now. I just recently got elected to city council, and I do want to go back to school, maybe law school or seminary, so
Okay.
serve in other capacities.
So did you pick up a bachelor's degree in there someplace?
I did. I obtained my liberal studies bachelor's in 2015. So going to school was, for me, definitely one of my goals. I believe that education does open doors for you. It's not always the case, but or specialized training. So definitely for me, it was something, another reason why I had enlisted, and I want to make sure that I utilized my benefits and encourage veterans to utilize their educational resources.
Okay. And when you went into college then this time, did you feel like you were ready for it?
Yes, I did, because I had so much more to offer, and so many more experiences. But yeah, it was intimidating at the same time because you're going to school with kids that were younger. So I was a non-traditional student, way after. And sometimes it was like, but again, some of those things that I struggled with because of my upbringing and there wasn't a strong support in educational resources. I don't think I took advantage of the educational resources, the tutoring, the labs, until I was well into my bachelor's degree.
All right. Now, and what are you doing currently?
Currently, I work for Grand Valley State University, and it's funny how it goes full circle. I work with Veterans Upward Bound, which is a federally funded program which assists veterans taking advantage of their educational benefits. So I've been with Grand Valley a few years before COVID. Well, a few years. I started before COVID. So it's been a few years. So that's been an eye-opening experience. But we target first-generation college, which I was, and had to find a lot of the resources on my own. And then, realizing that every veteran is different. So whether you're in a job right now and you want to, go to the next step, advancing in your current position. But definitely advocating for veterans and the resources. There's no reason why veterans shouldn't, even like myself, I didn't know about the resources. I was deep in my PTSD and depression and considering taking my life and not realizing that I had health benefits through the VA. So a lot of veterans aren't aware of their educational benefits, that you can be service connected and compensated for PTSD, depression, or like the Vietnam veterans, Agent Orange, and all the effects of war. We don't come back with a sign saying, I have this and this is wrong. I mean, we're soldiers. We're used to, you know, pulling ourselves up from the bootstraps and being like, what's next?
Okay. Now, a lot of different kinds of things fall under the label of PTSD, and you seem to be kind of willing to talk about a lot of this stuff, and it will help people if you can at all. Can you tell me what kinds of issues that you've had, or the things that have been a problem for you?
Well, I have learned it wasn't always easy. I remember when I came back from Iraq, being easily startled, and those are some of the symptoms coming back from Iraq, you know, never knowing what's kind of that vigilance.
Yes.
I remember
Hypervigilance, yeah.
waking up with nightmares, or, you know, like I feeling like I was back in Iraq and I couldn't get out, or, you know, improvise explosive devices and reliving those experiences that were agitating and awful, losing soldiers and or sense SCENTS that would bring me back. I remember being in guard duty, and they didn't. It's not, you know. It makes you appreciate garbage disposable, and, you know, that we have a place where we take all our trash and it's just not thrown all over the streets, or you have dead carcasses, you have, you know, body removals and all that stuff that we United States citizens take for granted. Because that was not the case, because they had burn pits, and, you know, there are effects from, you know, inhaling all that. I so desperately craved fresh air smells when I was overseas. Fresh air. Not just my family, but I wanted to smell fresh air. So I just cringed thinking about it, that, you know, sometimes a scent can just bring me back, or a sound, or things. And then just feeling like, how did I get so lucky when my battle buddies didn't make it? Sergeant First Class Pre-Staff or Specialist Brandon, or people that came back with injuries or lost limbs. So, you know, sometimes survivor's remorse.
Yeah, yeah.
But many different things. And then, you know, going through life and trying to act like everything's okay. I mean, the way I describe it is, I would be damned if anything was wrong with me, because I had goals and, you know, aspirations, going to college, getting my associates, getting my bachelor's, and the foundation started showing cracks. And then asking for help, that was hard for me, because we're used to helping. Soldiers, you know, the selfless service, my Army values of doing, and that's how sometimes we find our worth, and giving back to community. And then you're like, oh no, asking for help, that's hard.
So what got you to, you at some point then did ask for help? Kind of what got you to do that?
You know, it was just more than I could bear, the noise. It was just, I worked in a cubicle. So I started noticing that people walking up on me at work were like really making me angry, and that wasn't normal. Noises, just always being vigilant. So I sought help. I think they had the employee assistance program. You get 5 like free things, and then I had insurance, and so I sought counseling, and shortly after got the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, which post-traumatic can be from anything. And it you know, bringing awareness to that, because many people, many soldiers come back and we want to act like everything's okay, and we don't want a hand down, but sometimes we need a hand up, and we need to process those feelings, emotions, experiences that we've seen. Life and death.
Yeah.
Our life, you know, could change in a second. You know, we can be patrolling, and then be hit by an IED, and so that wreaks havoc on you.
Yeah.
You have to process it sometime. You have to really process it. I don't know how I did it. Thinking back, how I did that.
But somewhere in there, you realized you needed help and went and got it.
Yes.
Okay. Now, did you go to the VA at all? Are they part of this, or?
Actually, I didn't go to the VA right away because I had health insurance, but
Okay.
then work was difficult for me. They started harassing me and giving me a hard time for other reasons, and end up losing my job. They fired me and said that my work performance dropped, and so then I couldn't see the forest through the trees or the trees through the forest. And my battle buddy, Mike Newman, said, "Hey, apply at the VA.
Yeah.
I get such and such." And had it not been for my battle buddy, I don't know where I would have ended up. I don't know if I mean, I was already planning my suicide. And the thing of it is, I had already lost my serenity and my well-being of my physical body and mental, emotional. I had already lost everything. So suicide was next. And it's, when I talk about it, and I talk about it because if it can help somebody else
Right.
to know it's okay to ask for help. I remember ending up in the hospital, and it was like the worst thing I could do. I was at the lowest of the lowest, and I remember that I didn't even want to be seen that I had my glasses on, because I remember it was in July that I ended up in the hospital, and I got to the point where I could not drive on my lunch hour, that I had to go walk across the street and just sit there and meditate. And I remember hyperventilating, and I called my partner and said, "Hey, I don't feel well," and I ended up going to the emergency room, got admitted to the hospital at Holland Hospital. And I had the best doctor, Dr. Dumaroff, that was the best doctor, and just had compassion and empathy, but great bedside manner. And I was so worried about getting addicted to drugs. Just the things that you think about, the worst end scenario. Not knowing, but thinking I knew, like the worst case scenario, I'll get addicted to drugs, and asking for help. That's like the worst that you can do. And knowing that asking for help is the best thing that I could have done. So to sit here and say that's huge.
Yeah, and important for people to be able to hear.
Yes, for mental health, for physical body, mentally, mind, body, and spirit. I get it confused, but yes, being in a good place. So 7 years later, I'm able to say that I'm not a statistic, because the statistics are 92 for 22 that veterans are taking their lives because they don't get the resources. They don't know about the resources, or they're too afraid or ashamed to say they're struggling. That the cracks are starting to show. And
So what has been good for you or helpful for you? It's helped kind of get you back on track.
the resources, medication. I'm still on medication 7 years later. Mindfulness, meditating, being out in nature. I remember when my doctor said, "You need to start walking. Don't go back to work. You need to start walking." I was dreading it. I was just walking like a soldier, and I had a dog. So my dog, I rescued Gustavo, not this one, and he passed a couple years ago. And he felt everything, and I didn't know God spelled backwards as dog. And Gus saved my life, and he was there. I would get home from work, and he would just lay with me, and everything I felt he was going through, I was going through, he felt it. So dog therapy, pet therapy, I believe in it. Healing through the arts, Pamela Alderman, Kent County Veteran Services. So many tools, journaling, the power of our story, reflection, yoga. So many resources. Cognitive behavior therapy. So many different acupuncture, utilizing the resources, Women in Uniform, Wink out of Muskegon. So many different things. I mean, so many resources the VA offers, and resources within our communities. But healing through the arts, I am not an artist, so I thought, and I made my art exhibit My Beautiful Journey, BE, capital Y, capital O, capital U, Beautiful Journey, that talks about post-traumatic stress disorder. And just so many resources, the Veteran Center, but definitely counseling and medication and just being, I mean, being present. So there are so many different things that I do today that had I not gone through that time of my life, that I don't know that I would be here. In honor of Gus, I did start a business, GGY, Pet Walk-in Services, and so yeah, it said when I read this thing, it says, when I needed a hand, I found your paw. And I say I rescued Gus, but he actually rescued me, and he's why I'm here today. And my dogs love me unconditionally. They showed me what unconditional love was. Gus did. So I'm very grateful to both cats, felines and dogs. 'Cause I have a cat as well. So
how did you wind up in the Holland City Council?
you know, a long story. I think just everything that I did prepared me. Volunteering, giving back, my core values of honor, value, and selfless service. Started out volunteering, being very interactive with my children, volunteering. I knew that teachers have their hands cut out for them, and my hat's off to them. They're one teacher to 24, sometimes more students, and just volunteering. That's where I started, in my kids' classrooms, field trips, and I remember my kids are like, you know, when you were young, it was cool, and then you get to middle age, and they're like, Mom, do you really?
Yeah.
And even today, I'll be in the community, and they're like, you're Sydney and Zion's mom, or, you know. And so that's where I started, just giving back, volunteering for field trips, Girl Scout, Boy Scouts, volunteering at church, volunteering Project Charlie, just volunteering, different boards and commissions, being part of the police reserve. I had to apply for that. And that entailed being a police officer reserve, and working tulip time parades, working different events. So I just have come from a desire to serve and give back to the community. And it's, for me, it's a selfless way to just give back. It helps me to realize people in our community have it much worse. One of my mantras is more hands make less work. And just always been very intrigued. My major at Grand Valley, liberal studies with civic engagement, and who would have thought, who would have known that I would be elected city council? Started about a year ago. I ran into the city council, one of the city council persons, and it was COVID, and it was just like when it was starting that we can go back into stores, and I ran into him, and I'm like, thank you for what you do on city council. And I think he was caught off guard that I kind of knew what was going on, and he's like, you should really run for city council. He inspired me. And before that, I had ran into somebody, a female, a Latina, and she was running for a representative or something, and she lost it, but she inspired me. And then this council person inspired me, served like 20 years on city council, still serving with him today. And yes, it was an interesting process. He laid the seed, plant the seed, you should apply, and it was right around the time I filled out my application, got my signatures. Actually, I was running for the at-large position, but because I wasn't going to run against the current council person, Raul Garcia. I had great admiration and respect for him. So I was going to run against another one at large, and he was a fellow veteran. So I'm like, he's a fellow veteran, but I really respected my ward and Raul Garcia's position. But he approached me and said he wasn't running again. He's a lot younger than me, young family. Nothing but respect for him. I wouldn't run against him. And he said he wasn't running again, and it just so lined up that I won, beating my opponent. Like 60 to 40, very, so. Yes.
Are these nonpartisan positions?
They are
Yeah,
nonpartisan.
which here can be maybe a healthy thing.
Right, it's nonpartisan, and so people will ask you because they don't know, and I didn't know, and we won't vote on, abortion
Yeah.
and big things like that. What we talk about is local property taxes, millages, bonds, library, things that affect us locally, and still, even with the city, I thought I was very proactive, but I'm like a sponge learning stuff. Holland City is an awesome place to live. And who thought when I moved there 31 years ago, I was ready to get out of there. Like, this is the Twilight Zone. A church on every corner. They didn't sell alcohol. You couldn't cut your grass on Sundays when I lived in Zealand. It was foreign to me. And I was like, when my daughter graduates, I'm out of here. And here I am, empty nester, getting ready to build an accessory dwelling unit. And just life is amazing, recreating myself, nurturing my inner child through the arts. I'm taking voice lessons. That's part of my healing therapy. It's exciting. It's exciting.
Do you sleep?
I do sleep, but my body wakes me up. Today I was up at 4, and I'm trying to get back into the swing of things. I've learned how to swim as an adult. I know in Michigan, my kids all had the swimming instructions. I didn't learn until right before I went to the police academy, learned how to tread water. Did a mini triathlon. So I've done many things nurturing my inner child. And I look forward to do many things. I would love to get a law degree and attend law school. And attend seminary and just give back. And I am a true champion for the underdog or people that are marginalized. When one person hurts, we all hurt. So food security, affordable housing, and learning stuff. Learning. I want to learn how to play chess. I learned how to play gin rummy. I think I need to learn how to play euchre because that's a Michigan game. So I have my work cut out for me, definitely. And I'm just embracing life. And tomorrow's not promised, so living present and being grateful for the opportunities that my higher power will allow me to grow and learn and love, playing it forward.
All right. Well, the whole thing makes for a pretty remarkable story, so thank you for taking the time and sharing it today.
My honor and privilege. Thank you.